Hey guys, Mike in the Woods here. Today I'm taking a break from the tech side of things to take a look at some essential backcountry bushcraft gear, stick burner stoves, also sometimes called twig burner stoves. If you're new to backcountry adventuring, stay tuned because I'll go over what they are, their pros and cons compared to other stove types, and who would get a good use out of them. Before we get started, consider checking out my other videos and subscribing if you haven't already. Hit the like button if you find this video informative. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and let's do it. Stick and twig burner stoves are very popular with seasoned backwoods campers such as Joe Robinette with his Bush Buddy. They're a widely used tool across a broad spectrum of beginner, intermediate, and expert bushcrafters and backcountry adventurers. A stick burner stove, in principle, is pretty simple. It's a metal stove, usually one that folds up or breaks down for easy storage, designed to burn sticks, twigs, or other small combustible materials to heat a small pot or pan. I take mine with me frequently, although to be honest, most of the time I just use a normal campfire as I don't find myself in scenarios where the folding stove makes more sense. But that isn't always the case, and that's more so just a commentary on the particular types of trips I've found myself on lately. They're an alternative to other portable stove types, which are gas stoves and alcohol stoves. They have their own pros and cons, and it's really a trade-off of characteristics when deciding which type of stove you want to go with. Stick and twig burner stoves specifically offer these benefits over their counterparts. They have infinite fuel sourced from your environment. They have many fuel types like sticks and twigs, fuel cubes, leaves, pine cones, etc. They're generally smaller, lighter, and more compact than other setups. And finally, they're reliable because they're so mechanically simple and their performance is not tied to the external temperature. They do have their downsides, however, so here's the cons. They're not as fast or efficient as gas or alcohol stoves. They're entirely reliant on the environment for fuel, so location and weather heavily influence their utility. They may be restricted by fire bans, whereas a gas or alcohol stove would not be. And finally, they require your attention to keep feeding in fuel and make sure they're operating effectively. You can get them in many different sizes, from this rinky-dink little Esbit folder that I use to larger ones that you can cook an entire meal on. They're so mechanically simple that you can very easily make one out of an old soup or pop can. For the most part, simplicity has a direct correlation to reliability, and for a lot of seasoned outdoors adventurers, reliability is the name of the game. They're not as easy to use as gas or alcohol stoves, as you constantly have to feed in fresh fuel and adjust as needed to control your fire. It definitely requires more finesse. They can also get quite dirty, soot and resins from saturated hardwoods. This also gums up the bottom of your cookware too, so just be mindful of that. So let's talk about use cases, the situations in which I think twig and stick burner stoves are best suited for. Personally, I think their best application is for backcountry trips where speed and efficiency are not a major concern. Things like stationary destination camps like bug out shelters or bushcraft camps, or more light and easygoing backpacking or canoe trips where you're not pushing the limit of how far you can go in a day. In these situations, I think you'd be going more for the lightest and most reliable option available, in which I think the stick burner stove fits that niche well. They're also a great option for longer duration trips where carrying enough gas or alcohol to fuel your stove would be unwieldy. I'd also consider using them over a gas or alcohol stove in winter, where gas can have major pressurization problems and your alcohol fuel runs the risk of slushing over or freezing. At the end of the day, personal preference is probably the biggest factor at play here, and this is not a end-all be-all to picking the right stove, but if you're new to the outdoors game and wanting to make an informed decision, these situations are where I believe the stick burner stove shines best. Using a twig stove is pretty straightforward. You want it on a flat, fireproof surface, such as on dirt or on a rock, where it can't easily get knocked around. Ideally, you'll also want it shielded from heavy winds, although a slight breeze will actually work to your benefit by feeding the combustion process. Twig stoves are generally stored in either a folded state or in a disassembled state, so make sure it's put together or folded out and ready to go. The next step is to make sure you have all the fuel you'll need ready to go, as you don't want to be hunting down sticks while it's burning. You want to be able to give it your full attention. As you might have guessed by the name, you won't be using anything much bigger than sticks and branches to fuel your stove fire. You'll want a variety of sizes, from tiny little kindling to larger main fuel branches. You'll also want some tinder. And most importantly, don't underestimate how much firewood you'll need. More is better here. You don't necessarily have to break the wood down into pieces small enough to fit entirely inside the stove. A more manageable process is to break up the wood into more handleable pieces and feed them in from the side over time as they burn down. From here, hopefully you know the drill of starting with your tinder and working up to the larger fuel sizes. If not, I'll link you to a video below where I talk about how to set up a campfire. Essentially, you want to have some light and fluffy and most importantly highly flammable tinder, like some dryer lint, wood shavings, or birch bark, fluffed up and ready to catch a spark. Light that bad boy up, placing some smaller twigs on it to get them going, and work your way up to the larger sticks until you get a nice, good fire going in your little stove. Most importantly, make sure you leave room for the fire to breathe, especially if you're using a smaller stove like mine. As mentioned, a small breeze coming in will help with this, but make sure it's not strong enough to blow your fire out. Once it gets going and has a nice pile of burning coals at the base of your fire, now's a good time to put your pot or pan or whatever else you're trying to heat up. Keep in mind that because your twigs and sticks are small, you'll have to be constantly feeding in new fuel to keep it going. At this point, it's just patience until your food or water is good to go. Twig stoves, in my experience, are not as efficient or controllable as gas or alcohol stoves, so it might take a hot minute. Once you're done, you can let it burn itself out and let it cool down before dumping it, or you can dump water on it to douse the fire and immediately put it out, although this means you'll have to dry it off and clean off the ash paste you just created. You can use sand or dirt as well if that's available to you. Okay, so that was my quick and dirty beginner's guide to twig and stick burner stoves. By no means in depth, but enough I think for you to get a good starting point on deciding if one is the right choice and how to use them. They're generally very cheap and widely available, and if you're feeling adventurous, you can even make one yourself, so in my opinion, there's no downside to owning one. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below, where I or someone more knowledgeable on the subject will answer. Hit the like button if you find this video valuable so that YouTube promotes it and it can help out many more people. And if you're new to the channel, I take a look at the intersection of fun, futuristic technologies, and traditional outdoors experiences, so check out my other videos and consider subscribing so you don't miss out on cool and helpful videos in the future. I'll leave some Amazon affiliate links to my personal pick for some twig stoves, so check that out, or any of the other links in the description if you want to help out the channel, such as my online 3D print shop, where I offer a bunch of useful 3D prints and paracord items in the outdoors and gaming niches. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next video.